Alright, welcome back to another NestJS WebSocket tutorial. In this tutorial, you're going to now learn how to use the Socket.io client library to actually connect to our WebSocket server. So in the last video, we created a WebSocket server and we used Postman to test everything out. But what we're going to do is we're going to do an actual real implementation of consuming the actual WebSocket server from a backend. Okay, and then in the next video, I'll show you how we can consume the WebSocket server from the front end. So right now I have this NestJS socket consumer project. I just generated it. There's nothing in this project right now. Let me open up Visual Studio Code. Okay, so there's nothing at all. It's just like the basic scaffold of the project. And what we're going to do is we're going to connect to the actual WebSocket server. So I'll show you how this is going to work. Okay, so what we'll do is I'll do the same thing. I'll create a new folder and I'll call this socket, and then I'll create a new file called socket.module.ts. Okay, and essentially what we'll do in this module is we'll go ahead and just set up a connection to the actual WebSocket server. Now, how do we actually do that? Well, it's actually pretty simple. What we want to do is we want to just make a connection to the WebSocket server using the Socket.io client library. Okay, in the last video, what we did was we used the actual platform Socket.io, and that's for actually setting up the Socket.io server. In this video, we're going to be using the Socket.io client library to make the actual connection to the server. So this is going to be a little bit tricky, but I'll show you how it works. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll create a module, and I'll call this socket module, and then we're going to go ahead and annotate this with module, and we will pass in a providers array, and we'll pass in the value for a providers array in just a second. I'll go into the file and I'll call this socket .ts. I'll call it socket client.ts. I'll create a class called socket client, and then this will have to be a provider. So we're going to go ahead and use injectable. And then what I'll do is I'll take this socket client and I'll just pass it here, and we'll auto import that into the providers array like this. So, okay, so we're taking the socket client instance, or not the instance, but the import reference, and passing it as a value inside the array. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and connect to the socket. So first, let's just go ahead and install the Socket.io library. So that's really simple, or the Socket.io client library. So we'll type yarn add Socket.io client, Socket.io -client, Socket.io -client. Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and actually create an instance of the Socket.io connection, and it's actually really simple. So what I'll do is first I will go ahead and import io from socket.io client. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and do this. I'll just simply do public socket client, and the type will be socket client. This socket client type actually is supposed to come from the Socket.io client library. So we'll import a socket, and I'll just leave it like that for now. So that'll be the type annotation right over here. Okay, now this doesn't do anything yet. What we'll do is inside the constructor, we'll go ahead and reference this .socket client equals, and then we'll call the IO function. And we'll just pass in the URL to our WebSocket server, which is localhost port 3000, as in the last video. It's the same exact thing. Okay, and what I'll do is so this should actually make a connection to the WebSocket server. Okay, and so what I'll do next is I'll go ahead and simply just do this. I'll just simply do this dot. Or actually, let me do this. Let me implement on module init interface, and then we'll implement the on module init method. And once the module has initialized, we should be able to have this socket client instance be truthy. So we can listen to the connect event, which just basically means that when our client has connected, it's going to trigger this event. So let's just write a console log, and we'll just say connected to gateway. Okay, so before we proceed, we need to obviously import the socket module inside app.module.ts. So let's do that, socket module. And let's just start up our application, and hopefully everything goes well. We should be able to see, let's see, it says, oh, okay, whoops, we are using the same address. So let me just fix this real quick, because our other application is running on port 3000. So we need to change this to port 3001. The consumer is going to run on port 3001. Okay, now you can see it says connected to gateway. If we go to the other console, you're going to see that it says connected. Okay, watch this. If I restart the app, right, we're going to get another log over here. It says connected. All right, so you can clearly see that the connection is in fact working, which is great. So let's go into our consumer project, and let's actually consume those events that are being sent from the WebSocket server, okay? So we have the consumer, which is going to consume those events. And then we have the emitter. I'll call it the emitter. The emitter is going to emit the events. So that's the WebSocket gateway, okay? So what I'll do is I want to register the an event. So it's going to be the same event that is going to be emitted. So the server emits the onMessage event. So we want to consume that event. Now, how do we do that? Well, we just need to go ahead and reference this .socket client on, and then the name of the event, so on message, like this. Okay, but I don't want to do it this way. So what I'll do instead is I'll just go ahead and create a private method called register consumer events. And then I'll just simply take this, I'll move it down here. And then whenever the module is initialized, I'll just simply call this .register consumer events. Okay, so that way it'll register all of the events once the socket.io client has been initialized. Otherwise, if you call it before it's been initialized, it's going to give you a null error. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll just simply register all of our events down here. So this .socket client on message. Okay, and then it's going to go ahead and take in a callback function, and that callback function can have a payload, and we'll type annotate it as any. And let's just go ahead and do this. Let's just console log the payload. Okay, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's go ahead and console log the payload, and let's see what happens whenever the onMessage event is emitted from the socket server. So what we'll do is this. Let's go into the server over here. Okay, so we do need to trigger this new message event somehow. So typically that would be triggered in an actual application. The client would actually send that message to the WebSocket server. Okay, and then the WebSocket server would emit that event on message, and that would be sent to all of the other connections. Okay, so here's what I'll do. I'll just go ahead and inside the consumer, I will go ahead and do this. I will simply reference the socket client, and I will call emit. So I will go ahead and from the consumer side, I'm going to emit the event to the WebSocket gateway. The WebSocket gateway will receive that event, and it's going to fire the onMessage event. So we're going to basically trigger the new message event right over here. So watch this. So I'm going to emit this event, and for the payload, I'll just say message, hey there, and I want you to look at the logs and watch what happens. So what we did, and I know everything happened really fast, but let me just walk you through this. So the socket client class was instantiated, create the socket.io instance, that's the server, the socket.io client that will connect to the server. Whenever the onModule init method was called, it called register consumer events. Right over here, we emitted the new message event, okay, and we passed in this JSON object. And so this message was sent to the WebSocket gateway, which is this project over here. We subscribe to the new message event. So whenever clients want to send us events with the name of new message, this is the method that will handle that. Okay. Whenever we receive the new message event, we're going to trigger an on message event. The on message event is going to send alongside a payload with two properties, message and the original message body that was sent from the consumer. So that's why in the console over here, you see it says new message, content, and then that's the original data that we sent. So it's working. I'll additionally go into Postman and I'll show you how this is going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to I guess I'll connect to the gateway. Or let me just make sure I'm doing this right. Let me just comment this line out. So I guess what I'll do is I'll connect to the gateway and I will send an on message event, I guess. And, or actually, no, wait. I'll connect to the gateway and I'll trigger the new message event. Okay. The new message event over here will then emit the on message event, which the consumer project will emit. Will receive. Okay, so let's go into Postman. Let's do this. We're going to connect to our WebSocket server. Okay, we're going to go ahead and connect, and then we'll trigger the new message event. I'll just say hi. Okay, now watch this. In the console, you will see in just a second, before I do anything, you're going to see that in the console, let me just restart this real quick. Let me just console log this. I'll just say socket client. Let me restart. Okay, so this is the consumer project. So watch this. Send. See what happens? Content hi, right? So I am sending events to, so pretend like this is another user that is chatting, right? I'm sending messages to the WebSocket gateway. The WebSocket gateway is going to receive that event and it's going to emit its own event to all the other clients. Okay, see how that works? So that is how I'm consuming the client from another backend server. And a lot of times you might need to do this to receive live data, and you might want to do something and then send it somewhere else. So I figured I'd make a video showing you how to do this because it can be really useful. But yeah, so in the next tutorial, what I'll do is I'll show you how you can set this up by how you can set up a React project to connect to the actual WebSocket server. Because right now we're just connecting it from server side to server side. I'll show you how to do it from client side to the actual server side. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.